Now, let's step into the confirmation points and countermeasures. As seen up to here, the RSF system function depends on the proper operation of upstream processes such as pre-sedimentation, coagulation, flocculation and sedimentation to produce good quality water. Not only the sand filter and all other units must be monitored daily. In the manual, we introduce 8 key operation points. First, restricting access to the treatment area and intake points. This is to secure the prevention of the contamination from outside, both humans and animals. Second, inspecting sedimentation tanks for contamination, such as dead animals, debris. This is also for the safety of water quality. Third, performing jar tests and ensuring proper coagulant dosing. Since jar test is to be done by Porshwa operator, and the procedure can be checked in other manual for the Porshwa operators, this manual does not deal with the very details of the procedure in this manual. But jar test is crucial to the coagulant operation. DPHE has to supervise that coagulant operation is done with jar test. Fourth and fifth, confirming floc formation in the flocculation basin and sedimentation. If flocculation is poor and flocs are too tiny, the sedimentation will not be effective. Sixth, monitoring filter head loss over time. Filtration loss is the sign for the backwash timing. This is basically observed by the water level at the filtration filter. Seventh, measuring turbidity before and after RSF. If the turbidity is too high at the rapid sand filter, the filter will be clogged so fast and require many backwashes, causing waste of water. Moreover, filter will be likely deteriorate faster, too. Eighth, checking post-chlorination of treated water. This is very important to secure the water quality. Though the details will be explained in another session, the point is that the residual chlorine has to be measured at the water user's taps. If O&M is not properly conducted, it will bring many and critical risks as a result. First, deterioration of treated water quality, such as high turbidity, microbial contamination. Not only the appearance of the water is bad, but also bad water quality may cause waterborne infections. Then, failure of compliance to the drinking water quality. This is critical for the government agency. Public health hazards due to insufficient removal of as, Fe, impurities and bacteria. Since piped water scheme reaches many water users, once the water quality deteriorated, so many people will be affected as well. Reduced filter performance, clogging and increased head loss, resulting in low production. This will cause low financial benefits as water institution and inefficient use of chemicals and energy, increasing operational costs. This is another point for the effect to the financial aspect for the drinking water institution. Poor operational situation will require unnecessarily more costs. We will look into the confirmation points and control measures of each unit. Now we check pre-sedimentation basin. For pre-sedimentation, the key parameter is turbidity at the outlet. There are 55 parameters in Bangladesh drinking water standard, and it will be very challenging if we try to check all the parameters for O&M control purpose. So, we will focus on turbidity as the key parameter. The risk is that high turbidity from the pre-sedimentation will disrupt sedimentation and filtration processes. It is very important to remove particles at the sedimentation. There are two items which are necessary data to check the pre-sedimentation condition. One is turbidity at the outlet, and another one is flow rate. This flow rate is related to the retention time of the pre-sedimentation basin. The key point is that if the turbidity is above 100 NTU or less than 100 NTU. If outlet turbidity is over 100 NTU, sedimentation is not effective. This can happen when, firstly, raw water turbidity exceeds 500 NTU, secondly, sludge has accumulated and reduced effective volume, and lastly, the retention time is too short and the flow is too high. When turbidity is above 100 NTU, the action is to add coagulation or remove sludge before the rainy season. The risk which we will face in case a sludge management fails is explained here. As sludge accumulates, the effective volume of the basin decreases. It means that the more the sludge accumulates at the bottom of the basin, the more the basin loses the spaces where the sludges can settle. As a result, the volume in the basin where the water can be occupied will become small and the water is not retained in the basin as it used to be. So, it will cause short retention time and low efficiency of sedimentation. To diagnose the pre-sedimentation condition, it is necessary to know the sludge deposition situation. In this slide, I will explain how to measure the sludge accumulated in the pre-sedimentation basin. First, select several measurement points across the pond, normally 6 to 24 points depending on its size. Next, measure the total water depth using a marked pole. Then lower a disc attached to a rope until it touches the sludge surface. The sludge thickness is simply the total depth minus the sludge depth. This measurement should be done toward the end of the dry season so that sludge removal can be planned before the rainy season. This table shows an example of how sludge measurements can be organized. After collecting data from each point, compile the sludge thickness. When thickness reaches around 30% of the total depth, removal should be planned. At 50%, it becomes urgent. Regarding the action and countermeasures to be taken, sludge removal should be done during the dry season when turbidity is lower and treatment demand is stable. If operators wait until the rainy season, removal becomes difficult and may disrupt treatment. Ensuring adequate sludge removal before high turbidity periods is essential for maintaining sedimentation efficiency, and its typical removal frequency is every 1 to 2 years. The next unit is roughing filter. On this part, we focus on the role of the roughing filter. There are some functions. 1. Reduces turbidity from high turbidity raw water without using coagulant. 2. Has a supplementary effect, not a drastic turbidity reduction. 3. Especially useful during rainy seasons with extremely high turbidity. 4. In general, it is used for slow sand filtration but can be also used for surface water treatment plants. The main concern is clogging. When the filter media becomes clogged, the flow rate decreases, outlet turbidity increases, and the entire treatment plant becomes harder to operate. Raw water turbidity is the main cause of the clogging. Turbidity can exceed 1000 NTU during rainy season, increasing more clogging risk. In the roughing filter diagnosis, turbidity at both inlet and outlet, and flow rate, these are necessary data. These data are judged by if outlet turbidity is 100 NTU or more. In this situation, filter may have been deteriorated. The second point is efficiency of the turbidity removal is less than 0.7 and at the same time inlet turbidity is above 30 NTU. This also implies the filtration deterioration. The last confirmation point is slower flow rate. This can be checked by comparing the flow rate with the time when the roughing filter is installed or the design specification. Let's look at what actions to take when the roughing filter is confirmed to be deteriorated. The first step is removal of sludge. This means cleaning the filter media thoroughly. As shown in the illustrations, flushing and washing are essential to restore the porosity of the media. Next is flow rate control. The filtration velocity should be reduced to 0.3 to 1.5 meters per hour. If the velocity increases even though raw water quality has not changed, it often indicates that the filter media condition has improved after cleaning, or conversely, that clogging is occurring if the flow rate drops. If performance does not recover despite cleaning, media replacement may be necessary. Now we go to the aeration part. The first agenda, basic theory. This explains why aeration is essential in groundwater treatment. If aeration is insufficient, dissolved iron and arsenic will not oxidize into suspended particles, meaning they cannot be removed in sedimentation or RSF. So, the major risk is that contaminants remain dissolved and invisible even after treatment. To evaluate aeration performance, we check two key parameters. First, the dissolved oxygen, which should be above 4.0 milligrams per liter. And second, visual turbidity. After aeration, water should become slightly turbid as oxidation occurs. Here are the confirmation points for aeration. We begin with the dissolved oxygen level. If DO is below 4.0 milligrams per liter, aeration is insufficient. Poor DO directly affects the oxidation of iron and arsenic, which means these contaminants will carry over into the sedimentation tank and the RSF. We also observe the appearance of water after aeration. Good aeration produces a slight yellowish turbidity, indicating oxidized iron. If the water remains clear, oxidation may not be happening, and we should inspect the aeration equipment, nozzles, trays, and the falling height. Visual observation is a simple but very reliable indicator. When aeration performance is poor, the first step is to clean the aeration equipment. As shown in the photos, iron deposits, algae, or debris often block spray nozzles or trays, reducing oxygen contact. Cleaning these parts can significantly improve aeration immediately. If oxidation remains weak, increasing the falling height or adjusting the flow pattern may help. Then we will go to the flocculation. This slide introduces the importance of proper coagulant dosage in flocculation. Inappropriate dosage rates of coagulants result in poor floc formation, poor sedimentation efficiency, and high turbidity in overflow water from the sedimentation tank. If the dosage is inappropriate, either too low or too high, flocs do not form well. This leads to poor sedimentation efficiency and high turbidity entering the RSF. The necessary data include floc formation condition, dosage rate and turbidity relationship, coagulant consumption, and pH, which must stay within the optimal range for coagulation. Operators should check these daily to maintain stable flocculation. This shows visual examples of floc formation quality, such as good, partial flocculation, and failure. If the flocculation failure or partial flocculation failure situation are observed for more than 1 week in a streak even when jar test is conducted and is reflected to the operation, it is doubted that daily dosing operation is not working in appropriate manners. Jar test is to confirm the appropriate dosage in a very small scale for an experiment, though the details of the jar test procedure is not included in this video as it is the work of the plant operator of Poshwa since this video is targeting the DPHE officers. Good flocculation produces large, visible flocs that settle easily, like the left in the photos. Partial flocculation results in small, weak flocs, which often break and carry over into sedimentation, as seen in the middle one of the photos. Failed flocculation shows almost no floc formation, and water remains milky like the right beaker in the photos. This part explains the key concept of dosage rate in flocculation. The general recommendation is to keep alum dosage within 20 to 60 mg per liter, depending on turbidity. But you have to be careful that the appropriate dosage rated to be obtained by jar tests. Correct dosing is critical because it determines the quality of floc formation. When dosage is below 20 mg per liter, check the turbidity and if the turbidity at the inlet of the flocculation basin. If the turbidity is below 20 NTU, the flocculation operation is generally not likely to have a serious problem. If the turbidity is above 20 NTU, the flocculation operation may have a problem and the action counter measure below should be taken. It means that the dosage is too small. When dosage is above 60 mg per liter, check the turbidity and if the turbidity at the inlet of the flocculation basin. If the turbidity is above 500 NTU, the dosage rate may be appropriate, though still the floc formation should be observed carefully and its record is to be kept. These graphs show how turbidity responds to different alum dosages. The graphs show the relation between the alum dosage and turbidity after treatment. This graph shows that it does not necessarily mean that the more you add coagulant, the better the water is treated. The coagulant performance generally depends on the dosage and turbidity. However, the optimal dosage rate should be checked every day with turbidity measurements. For example, the optimal dosage may be 30 mg per liter in the morning but rise to 45 mg per liter in the evening as turbidity increases. This is why jar test results should be checked several times a day, not only once. Now, we focus on the main confirmation points for flocculation. First, alum has to be consumed every day. Otherwise, problems on procurement, financial situation, store management, dosing system or manpower allocation is doubted. Secondly, monitor the relationship between dosage and turbidity and ensure changes are logged properly. As the turbidity changes from time to time, turbidity has to be measured as frequent as possible, and the dosage adjustment has to follow it as well as you see in the graph. In the graph, the trend of the purple line follows the trend of the green line, But if the alum consumption trends like in the red line, it is doubtful if the dosage is correct or not. Illuminating to the turbidity's fluctuation, if the coagulant's consumption varies, it implies the dosage is not controlled appropriately. -50% to +100% change of daily fluctuation is doubtful. Another confirmation points for the dosage rate is pH. The recommended pH range is 6.5 to 7.5. Flocculation efficiency is often highest around 7.0. This is because alum work is related to electron and it is based on the pH. Alum can work even when pH is 8.52. However, flocculation performance is the highest around 7.0 in general. It is likely to happen that pH is too low, 6.5, rather than high, 7.5, since coagulants, alum, are acid. If pH drops too low, below 6.5, floc formation becomes weak and fine particles do not settle properly. When flocculation performance is poor, firstly you have to check the jar test situation. Conduct jar tests to set the optimal coagulant dose. Ideally, it is recommended to test 3 times a day based on past records. Then, if floc formation is poor, check alum dosing rate and dissolution. There might have been miscalculation, too. This can happen especially as a human error. Lastly, review jar test records and operator skills. Provide training if tests are not done properly. In this manual, the jar test procedure is not explained, but the detailed procedure is found in the existing manual for the Porsche operators. What should you do in case of high or low dosing rate to turbidity fluctuation? Since turbidity can change from time to time, this situation can happen while the plant operators don't recognize the changes of the raw water turbidity. First, it is strongly recommended to conduct jar tests to confirm whether the current dosing rate is appropriate for the present turbidity. Next, check the stock record of coagulant. If consumption does not follow turbidity changes, it means dosing adjustments are not being made properly. Also, calibrate the alum flow rate at the dosing point using a measuring cylinder and stopwatch. If pH drops below 6.5, add caustic soda before flocculation. If flocculation fails severely and turbidity becomes too high, temporary suspension of operation may need to be considered. If agitation strength or mixing time is not sufficient, flocs will not form properly even when jar tests are conducted and the optimum alum dosage is correctly applied. This is a very common misunderstanding in plant operation. We tend to focus the chemical dosage first, but the real problem is often hydraulic. Flocculation requires gentle and continuous mixing so that destabilized particles can collide repeatedly and grow into larger flocs. If the mixing is too weak, particles do not meet. If the retention time is too short, particles do not have enough time to grow. Two simple checks are necessary here. First, visually observe the floc formation at the outlet of the flocculation basin. Second, confirm the flow rate, because the flow rate determines how long the water remains in the basin. When flocs are small, fragile, or not forming despite correct dosing, insufficient agitation strength or retention time must be suspected rather than incorrect alum dosage. Here are the confirmation points for the agitation strength. When flocculation failure or partial flocculation continues for more than 1 week, even after jar tests are conducted and the dosage is adjusted accordingly, this indicates that the problem is not related to chemicals. And also, checking the daily flow rate records is effective. Large changes in flow rate during the period of poor flocculation are strong evidence that the retention time in the basin has been reduced. When insufficient agitation strength or retention time is confirmed, practical countermeasures depend on the type of flocculation basin. For paddle-type mixers, the motor speed can be adjusted, usually increased, to improve the mixing condition and promote flock growth. For baffle plate type basins, which are most common in Bangladesh, operation should be stopped, the basin should be cleaned, and the plate positions should be adjusted to restore proper mixing. If excessive flow rate is the cause, reducing the flow rate is necessary to increase retention time. If this is not possible and turbidity exceeds 10 NTU, stopping the operation should be considered. At minimum, users should be informed not to drink the water, although it may still be used for washing purposes.